LeBron James had his best game of the series. I thought LeBron had a good series, strong series, but this was his best game. 30 points. Took the ball into his hands late in this game to kind of take it over, and they won 122-101. Steph, 32 points, though he shot just 11 for 28 in the closing game. But, Rob, what were your thoughts? You have a take about this series.
Yeah, it was more about the Warriors, Chris, and I think we ignored who they were all year. I know they had a great record at home, but they struggled big time, and there were some chemistry issues. We talked about it, and ultimately they weren't together. This wasn't the team that won the championship a year ago. It just wasn't. You would have thought they came back, right, with the same pieces. I know Wiggins missed time, Chris. He had some personal issues. Right. The punch by Draymond Green and Jordan Poole becoming invisible in the playoffs, and just the whole thing. And then they lost 3 road games, right? And they lose 3. They couldn't win.
In this series, they lost.
Yeah, in this series, they struggled against the Kings, Chris. They had to win that game 7, and I think maybe people thought, they beat the Kings, a young, inexperienced group that pushed them all away. Yeah. They lost game 6 at home when they could have closed them out. That should have been the warning right there, even though they won that series, that this isn't the same team. So they are who they really were, even though we didn't want to believe it, I think, until we saw it finally, Chris. That's the kind of respect you give a team when they've won so much in the past and they just won a championship last year.
That's a good point. Right.
Right? That's
it's hard to write a team like that off. Especially when their best player. I would, Rob, Steph, to me, is playing as good as ever. I mean, I think he's as good as he ever was.
But that team, Chris, we saw the warning signs when we look back. Don't you think now when you look back, like there was issues there?
They had a very up and down season. I thought a lot of it was just, obviously there were a lot of injuries. Steph missed nearly 30 games. Wiggins, as you said, missed a month and a half or so. So they had a lot of injuries. The road record was horrible, injuries or not. So that was definitely
they were too good to lose like that, right? They were too good to lose that many games.
Absolutely. Now, I thought late in the season they won 2 big road games, and then as they were climbing and fighting for that 6th seed, and then they beat Sacramento in that game 7 on the road, and so I thought, okay, their road woes are behind them. But Rob, I think this was more about the Lakers. And I mean, I was a little higher on the Lakers than you, even though we both picked the Warriors.
I wasn't high. I didn't think they would beat Memphis. I didn't.
And see, I didn't too either. I picked Memphis. I was fooled by when I picked Memphis over them. It was because remember how much they struggled late in the season in games they needed to win.
Right.
And Utah, which was sitting out its 2 best players, was giving them all sorts of trouble. And Chicago and like bad teams.
Chicago beat them, if you remember.
Right. And I was like, they are not stepping up. And then come playoff time, they really play better. But I think this is what it boils down to, Rob. And Anthony, remember, they have not been healthy for a long time. Like AD and LeBron have kind of alternated being injured. We remember AD in Phoenix, he tried to play early in that series and couldn't with the bad groin. But when those 2 are healthy, they are arguably the only team in the NBA with 2 top 10 players. Now, some would say Phoenix, which is fair. If Devin Booker has risen to that caliber, which he very well may have, that's fine. But AD and LeBron are clearly 2 of the top 10 players in the league. And then, Rob, the trade, the deadline moves, you got to give Rob Pelinka credit because as much as you and I definitely think Westbrook was, bore too much of the blame. But we all knew, you and I said from the get-go, all the way until he was traded, he doesn't fit. And once they moved him out of there, and they brought in, Austin Reeves has emerged. He's a nice player. I got to give Austin Reeves some credit. He is a really good player. But D'Angelo Russell, that was a trade, and he is, he's up and down. He's inconsistent, but when he's on, he's tough. Lonnie Walker obviously played well. Rui Hachimura, they've got their 2 stars, Rob, and one is a big AD, and one is big in LeBron. By today's standards, he's a big player, Rob, but he also is obviously a perimeter guy. And then you got the role players around him. So I think the Lakers are tough, man. I think, we underestimated them. I think this was more about them. There was some stuff about the Warriors. You said they're small. They forget going small. They went tiny.
And let me say
tiny.
But let me say this, Chris. I hear you. But and I don't have it right in front of me, maybe Rob G. When LeBron and AD play, Chris, they've been a 500 team, even when they play together. And I understand 20-16.
But most of that was with Westbrook.
No, but I'm just saying, like they didn't play that well together. Number 2, the AD factor. Well, 2 things. AD was very inconsistent, so you never knew which AD was showing up. And number 2, LeBron didn't have the same impact on winning. We saw him put up big numbers, Chris. You just talked about the 30 points in game 6. There were plenty nights when he had 30-some-odd points and they still didn't win. And I get it. They made trades and they got a better roster than they had.
That's the difference. If they had not traded Westbrook, Rob, I don't think they'd be here. It was because 1, Westbrook was a bad fit, and 2, they didn't have most of these players. They had Austin Reeves, but not the other guys.
Because those other parts were there, but they weren't winning like they should have. There was games we still thought that even with LeBron and Westbrook, they should have won more games. I mean, it was incredible when you think about 2 years ago, LeBron averaged 30 points, almost won the scoring title, Chris, and they didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, but again, LeBron, you're right in that he does not have the same impact he used to, but a lot of that was AD was out in a lot of those games. And when LeBron and AD were, most of that record, what was the record when they were together?
20-16.
Okay, 20-16. But most of that was with Westbrook there. You take him out, I mean, they started cooking once the trade deadline came. And a lot of that, remember, was without LeBron. And I mentioned the games after I mentioned the games late in the season when LeBron, when they struggled, right? Utah, Chicago. A lot of those games, if you look back, LeBron was scoring more than 30 points. And that is not the formula for them to win anymore. Now, he can get 30, but it's how he gets it. He's got to he should play within the system. He or AD, depending on if AD has his offense that night, is their best player. But LeBron is now getting in the system, Rob. And if you look at it, you see Austin Reeves feeling free, right? To make plays on his own, not even to pass. LeBron doesn't touch it on a lot of possessions. Sometimes they might look off LeBron. Same with Dennis Schroeder. Same with D'Angelo Russell or Rui Hachimura when he has it going, or even Lonnie Walker during this past series. And I'm not saying that's not a disrespect to LeBron. It is just the fact that he is fitting in rather than being the system, and everything has to revolve around him. And I think that is what makes them so dangerous. They've got 2 legitimate 20 to 25-point scorers, and then a nice cast of role players around them. And they're playing. I think LeBron is I think he learned, Rob, late in the season. I'm getting 38, I'm getting 36, and we're struggling to beat a bad team.
Right.
And now I can just play within the system. I still get my 25-ish, and everybody eats, so to speak, and we're much more effective. So
okay, here's to your point. Okay, that they started, Chris, 11-15 through early February,
right?
But they closed the season 9-1 together. So there it is. When they added those other pieces, yeah, they became much better. But before that, it used to be like they should have won more games. It was surprising that those 2 guys playing are 4 games under 500.
They didn't have 3-point shooting around them, and Westbrook couldn't space the floor. teams weren't guarding him a lot. So you back into the paint. And I think they're legit. I said, Rob, that the winner of this series, Lakers-Warriors, I thought was going to be the favorite in the West. And so I'm going to go with the Lakers. I think Denver is going to be tough. And, you know, they look, there's 2 Western Conference finalists, so maybe they got a shot. But remember, the Lakers beat them 4-1 in the bubble, and a lot of people are pointing to that to say, oh, you know, the Lakers have their number. But remember that year, the Lakers had Dwight Howard as a backup. And, I mean, he obviously wasn't the Dwight Howard of old. But, Rob, remember how valuable he was in those playoffs.
Yep.
You know, coming off the bench, he played well. They're going to need that size against Denver. And so, you know, that's why, again, I'm picking the Lakers. But I do think that it's going to be a tougher series than it was a few years ago. Because the Lakers, you know, they had Kyle Kuzma, who was 6'10". Now, he's not a big, so to speak, but Markieff Morris. They had JaVale McGee, you know, and he and Dwight, you know, played a role in that series. So they're going to have their hands full, but I think the Lakers win this.
Yeah, I'm going with Denver. They've been good all year. People have discounted them. I've been joking the whole time. People call them chicken nuggets, and nobody's had. They've done everything they were supposed to do this postseason. I've been impressed by them. All the praise that the Joker's been getting, because people have seen him, Chris, on this big stage dominate and play great when he was supposed to. And he'll be a handful. This will be a little different for the Lakers because they've had the advantage with AD. But this will be different. I like Denver. I'm going to pick Denver.